We are going to start off talking about the New York Liberty, kind of going player by player, especially based on this last game that they had this Sunday. And then we'll transition to talking about their specific matchup with the Minnesota Lynx. So let's jump in with Jonquel Jones. So I actually first started watching the Liberty when they played the Aces in the Commissioner's Cup final last season, which for our more NBA centric audience, that is basically the equivalent of the IST final. The IST was effectively modeled after the Commissioner's
Mhm.
Cup in the WNBA. Jonquel is a center. She was dominant in that game. The Aces had absolutely no answer for her on either end. Like she was scoring, rebounding, blocking. She was shooting like she's a pick and pop big as well. Just incredibly skilled. And it seems to have been a consistent story both last season throughout the playoffs and then this past regular season. And now we're heading into the playoffs again. That her involvement in the offense is going to determine the Liberty's ceiling, and it was actually pegged as a major contributor to their struggles in the finals last year to the defending champion Las Vegas Aces. Well, now they're the two-time defending
Yeah.
champions because they won the finals, right? And so it's something that I've been monitoring throughout the games that I catch of the Liberty this season. Do you agree with that narrative about the like that tie between
Mhm.
Jonquel's importance to the her involvement in the offense and the team's overall ceiling? And then if so, how would you assess how the team has done this year to consistently integrate her into the offense and also the job that she's done to keep herself involved?
Well, I'm glad you said that, last little addendum because it really is about that. We kind of have a joke among some of us like the Liberty's title chances rest on if John Quell Jones wakes up on the right side of the bed in game 5 in the final. Like she is for those newer fans. I don't like everybody uses the word mercurial, but there are games where there's stretches where she looks like the second best player in the world. Like I thought she was that for the first month of the season, where the two-way impact was just off the charts. I thought she was clearly, the best player on the Liberty. And I think even the second half of last year, she was recovering from a foot injury in the first
Mm,
half. She might have been the best player on the team, even though Stewie won MVP. It's about her first and foremost, continuing to have that, I don't want to say effort every night, but involvement and engagement. And if she gets too early fouls or too early turnovers, not having that affect, kind of the way that she operates. I also think her raw numbers are not really what to look at all the time
mhm,
because it's so essential that she is a legit 40% three-point shooter, a genuinely great extra passer, perimeter passer. You'll see high-low where Stewie posts up a mismatch in the paint, and Jonquel might be the best entry passer on the team because of
mhm.
how tall she is and the angles, she can kind of exploit.
Yeah.
So she may not be getting all the post touches and all the rebounds and ending up with like 20 and 10, but there are nights when she has, 12 and 8 where she looks like the best player on the floor. Now, the Liberty occasionally don't have a great balance of not getting her the ball in the post when she needs it, not getting her the ball, in her spots. So I do think that it's an extremely important, maybe the swing factor in their playoff run. And it's definitely one of those equal partnerships where it's on both of them to make sure they get the best production out of JJ.
I can't remember exactly which game it was, maybe about 2 weeks ago. But so this was also the case in the game that they played versus the Aces last week,
Mhm.
where there was a point in the game where they were actually trying to kind of force feed her the
Yeah.
ball inside, but they collapsed on her in the paint almost immediately off the catch. And, often she is great at like making that pass out, but
Mhm.
it's almost like if there's an instance where she gets the ball, and they are like a little bit late to collapse, but then they come in. It's worse because she'll kick out if they collapse immediately. But if she has enough time
Mhm.
to, go for that layup, often what's happening is that she'll immediately like put the ball on the floor and
Yeah.
it creates a big turnover risk.
Mhm.
And it'll happen like repeatedly just throughout the game because this is just something that she does. It's interesting watching players like her versus someone like uh Asia, or I can even compare it to say like Jokic, who's really good at like not immediately putting the ball down because he's got a little bit more kind of in his bag when it comes to like post footwork. Like, okay, I can get to the basket without like taking a dribble here and putting the ball at risk of like the turnover. But that's just something that I've been watching. And I wonder if just the fact of how teams are treating her in that way is one of the reasons that it's difficult to get her involved on the inside to where she does end up drifting out to the perimeter more. Do you think that that is perhaps a factor?
Definitely, and I think it part of it is the liberty when they force feed a matchup takes them out of what makes them so great,
Right.
and, this is not a rare phenomenon. A lot of teams go through that, and the other thing is that she doesn't have that sort of Jokic quality where he can catch it anywhere and immediately turn, face the rim, and do a little hook shot. Like, her post ups are slow moving, and so she likes to pivot a lot under the basket and take a dribble and a pump fake instead of just going right up. And anybody I think who's watched the Liberty this season has seen that result in fewer paint points and layups at the rim than maybe you'd expect. And the opportunity to foul her on the floor, which is robbing her of easy free throws. Like against the Aces,
Right.
you saw Kelsey Plum step in front, and you want to just be like, Jonquel, just go up. It's Kelsey Plum. But she feels the need to, step through, step around her. And for all of her incredible qualities, of which I'm sure we'll discuss even more, she is not the quickest or most explosive vertical leaper. She's not a just go up and finish. She's a burrow into you, create space with her body, and then kind of, fade away or create an angle to the basket.
So I wanted to talk about Sabrina Ionescu next. And I'm going to move things a little bit out of order here because I want to stay on this conversation on Jonquel. One of the um, major kind of two-man or two-person partnerships on this team is Sabrina and Jonquel in pick and roll and pick and pop, and that just connection seems to have been the backbone of a lot of the most effective plays that the Liberty have run this season. And I saw a lot of it earlier in the season, whether it
Yeah.
was how a play is initiated, how maybe it's an action that they flow into after an initial play.
Yeah.
And actually, the videos that I have here were all pulled from a Nets Daily article by you, Lucas. We're going to put the link to that in the description.
Mhm.
And this play seems to have been supplanted by the Sabrina Stewie pick and pop. They actually went to this at volume in the game yesterday versus the Lynx, but I wanted to include this video from this game versus the Aces. So John Cole's on the wing, and they're helping completely off of her in that instance where Stewie's the screener, Sabrina's about to is driving, and they're helping completely off of Jonquel there. And Stewie goes for this really early floater. So not that there are other things that you could do in this situation, whether it's
Yeah.
passing to Jonquel or going
Yeah.
in a little bit deeper for the shot. I wonder why they went away from it seems to me. I haven't caught
Mhm.
every single Liberty game, but I was really actively looking for the Sabrina Jonquel pick and roll even in the game yesterday, and I didn't see it once.
Let me fast forward a bit. At the end of the game, you saw Sabrina Niara Sabali pick and roll,
Yes,
and
yes.
Niara is a very different type of athlete where
Mhm.
she is like a truly explosive roller. Like catch it at the free throw line, no dribble, two steps, I'm at the rim. I'm gonna finish
Yeah.
like with a near dunk. And that I think illustrates the difference. Teams
Between,
between Niara
Jonquel
and
rolling and
mhm.
okay.
Or just between or illustrates why, sorry, we've
Yeah,
seen
go
the
ahead.
switch. Jonquel is an excellent 4-on-3 short roll passer. She's an excellent almost think Joel Embiid, I can catch it at the free throw line and either shoot this or, like, take a dribble, and you're not gonna stop me. Whereas Joel Embiid isn't the if I'm getting behind you, it's a lob up to the square
Right.
and I'm going to dunk it. And that would be sort of what Niar Sabali is. And so it's a few reasons for this. The thing I'll say is that teams are not doubling Sabrina right now because of her shooting struggles, which I know we're going to talk about. And so when teams are kind of playing that straight up drop coverage, you could say, it's more imperative. I think it helps her out more to have a roller that's going to explode behind the defense where she can get to that pocket pass. But in a lot of these Jonquel clips, it's to go to Sabrina. Now she kicks it over to Jonquel, who can either pop for an open three, or if someone steps up to her and she is a 4-on-3, it's swing, swing. And that's why that action was so prolific for them early in the season. I think with Stewie, you know, teams are so worried, and you can see on that Sabrina floater clip, Stewie's roll gravity, right? Like Alicia Clark isn't
Yeah.
even worried about Sabrina turning the corner. And that's twofold. It's because she thinks that Sabrina is going to take a really tough floater, and also that we need to make
Alicia
sure.
Clark is the defender on,
Yes,
Stewie here.
yes,
Mhm.
she's the, yes. And you can see her, you
Yeah.
know, really.
It's kind of like, we've seen this coverage on the Nuggets a lot more where,
Mhm, mhm.
teams are playing the role or Jokic's, like a shorter pop much harder and kind of giving, like, Jamal the open lane. In this case, it's Sabrina Ionescu who's getting a little bit more space, maybe, and then you're getting some help as they help off of, Jonquel on the wing, but it's, you know, you can still attack that coverage.
Right. And I tweeted that. I'm like, Sabrina, get to the front of the rim and then either go up or like, she has the corner kick out, she has the John Quell kick out. I think since that game, she's been more intentional about
Mm.
let me probe further and swing for open threes. So it's almost more about how they're guarding Sabrina that makes Stewie an
Hmm.
effective pick and roll partner because and again, I go back to Niara Savali. If they're just playing straight up drop coverage and the big has to worry about Niara getting behind her and recovering to take away that easy layup, now that kind of encourages Sabrina to get to the front of the rim, to probe further. So I just think, they're not getting the most out of John Quell in that action if she doesn't get to do all the short roll 4-on-3 stuff. And also, she is shooting 39%, 40% from three this year. Having her on the wing, pulling her matchup away from the rim as well, if Sabrina, makes that pass,
True.
is not
Because
such a
they
bad
basically
thing.
had the center was helping off of the wing onto Sabrina's drive. It was kind of like not the
Yeah.
strongest help, but Sabrina took the bad shot anyway.
Right.
But at least that center wasn't at the rim protecting the rim, so you can see that.
Yeah, no,
I can see what you're
you're
saying
not
there.
just gonna ignore her on the perimeter. Like if Sabrina kicks that and John Quell shoots it, that's a very good possession for the Liberty.
So let's talk about Sabrina a little bit more. Our audience may know Sabrina Ionescu from the NBA All Star game. She actually went toe to toe with Steph Curry in the 3 point shootout between the two of them. I thought it was actually the best event of
Oh yeah.
the All Star game, kind of by far. And she only just barely lost because Steph got hot at the end. Oh my God, this team barely lost because Steph got hot. That is a tale as old as time. She's really known for her shooting, but that hasn't really popped this season for any extended stretch. She's currently shooting 34% on 8.6 attempts. That's high. Like I would love if anybody on the Nuggets was taking 8.6 threes per game. Last season, she was shooting 46% on 7.9 attempts. What do you think has caused such a steep decline in the shooting? Like you could say she was really like hot
Yeah.
last season. It was completely unsustainable, but that's a 12% drop in efficiency, on a shot that she's, known for.
First of all, great lead in with the All-Star game. That was professional bit of podcasting.
Thank you.
Um, very honored to be on the show, as I said. And second of all, one thing that's interesting is the difference in sample size between the WNBA and NBA seasons that I always have to rewire
Mm,
my brain for. And I don't want to just, I'm not saying Sabrina's shooting last year was completely that, but that certainly is a part of it. The other thing I would say is that now that she's playing more on the ball, her shots are just so difficult, the
mm.
majority of her threes. Last year with Courtney Vandersloot handling more, you'd get Sabrina flying off the ball, Stewie slips to the rim, off a screen. And if they go with Stewie, then Sabrina ends up with a catch and shoot three. And I think that really got her going, and translated into a lot of her off the dribble looks. Now, the other thing that I have tweeted is that last year is starting to look like a significant outlier for her in terms of off the dribble 3-point percentage. She shot in the low 40s last season. Every other year of her career, including this, it's either high 20s or like right low 30s. This is kind of who she's been as a shooter in her WNBA career, a way more prolific catch and shoot player. And I think that's what we're seeing with these defenses. At the beginning of the year, it's Sabrina just shot 45% from three, 8 attempts, all time great shooting season. We have to be up on the pick and roll. We have to trap her. Like, no, 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 she's not getting these looks off. Now teams are recalibrating, like, maybe she really is like a 30% pull up 3-point shooter at heart. And a lot of this is the looks she takes, which are a few of them are just impossible. So you can account for like 2 or 3 misses of those. But part of it is a regression to the mean, kind of who she's been. And then part of it is long season, just regression as you'd expect a little bit. Olympic, she played on the Olympic team.
Right.
So it's definitely going to be interesting to see for her. But that is not, we're not guaranteed that she's this 40% 3-point shooter just automatically, especially with the looks that she takes.
So the other thing that I wanted to highlight about Sabrina's season is actually her playmaking. That's something that has
Hmm.
popped this year. She's actually top 5 in assists in the WNBA, both in total and per game, which is 6.1 assists. That's nothing to sneeze at. Can you elaborate a bit on what her increased role as a playmaker has actually meant for the Liberty's offensive versatility? So you talked about how last year, she would have a more prominent off-ball role with Courtney Vandersloot handling. But do you think that Sabrina being on the ball actually improves their versatility, or hurts it because you no longer have those other options where you have your best like movement shooter flying off of these screens?
Yeah, you do lose that element of the offense, this deadly, like code red movement shooter, which captures so much defensive attention. But it also allows them now to play these long defensive minded lineups where it's Sabrina, two big wings, Stewie and JJ, because you can play her as the primary ball handler. I think early in the season, it really did make them more versatile because, and I keep going back to it, teams would trap her. And Stewie and JJ are just, you have two elite short role players that kill 4-on-3 situations. And she was doing such a good job at generating rim attempts for herself, getting into the lane and kicking out. And the Liberty didn't really have that last season, like this primary high pick and roll, I'm going to get to the rim or in the lane type of score. And if Sabrina is that, it certainly adds another element to their offense. In addition to being like, what you've noticed on their defense, where they play these huge long lineups. And it's because Sabrina can now play the one more effectively, and it
Hmm.
allows you to put different lineups on the court.
So if nothing else, it certainly improves their defensive versatility just by
Mhm.
virtue of that fact, right?
Definitely.
I just find her role on the Liberty this year to be quite fascinating. So Lucas actually wrote an interesting article for Swish Theory on Sabrina that was really about like the role of the combo guard.
Yes.
And it feels like Sabrina seems to be in a stage that is something akin to one that Jamal Murray was in earlier in his career, where you were primarily this like off ball, like scoring guard.
Mhm.
Now you're taking on the point responsibilities, and you're seeing kind of in real time a player try to process that change in their role to where on any given possession, you have to be thinking about not just shot selection, whether you're going to shoot at all, which shots you're going to shoot. Are you going to be playmaking? Are you going to be primarily looking to shoot? Are you going to be primarily looking to playmake? Because your
Yeah.
job is now both advantage creation and potentially play finishing. at the same at the same time, and it is a lot to balance, and I find we have so many in the NBA, so many combo guards that, uh, tilt, like, more one way or the other, and I think that, you know, Sabrina I always think I think of Jamal Murray just by virtue of the role, not necessarily play style, because of that, and on a team that has so many other high level players that can be the advantage creator, that can be the play finisher around her, like that, you know, further complicates the processing, but obviously it's a good problem to have.
Yeah, and
Right.
you can see the wheels turning for her in a game. Like, she played the Aces a week ago. She shot 6 for 21. They go to Dallas, who is terrible, and unserious. And she's working on, like, okay, let me not take these. You can see her like, let me get 2 feet in the paint and jump stop and kick it out. And all of a sudden, the next game, she has 14 points and like 11 assists, and she only takes 10 field goal attempts. So it is a very conscious balance that a tightrope that she has to walk. And yeah, as well as she was shooting from two and getting to the front of the rim, and now defenses have adjusted, you can't have your primary ball handler, and I'm sure this is something Nuggets fans have thought at many times. You can't have your primary ball handler shooting 5 for 18 with 3, 4 assists in a game where the vast majority of their possessions, they're taking a tough shot. And that's not to, denigrate either of them, because Sabrina has these possessions where she high pick and roll, make a pass. Now I'm going to relocate and like do on the ball and off the ball excellence in the same possession. And like last season, she was such a willing and good screener off the ball. And that allowed her to be, a high volume 3-point shooter, kind of like, think of Steph Curry setting all the screens he does and then flying off a different screen. So it's an incredible load physically when you have to always be ready to run off the ball and handle a high volume on the ball,
Yeah.
but also suddenly you're oscillating towards I'm shooting too much. So I admire, both of them for what they do at their best, but when it looks bad, it doesn't it looks bad.
I'm sure, Will is giggling to himself right now that I somehow managed to turn this into a conversation about Jamal Murray. We've been talking about him a lot this summer. Let's
Yep.
talk about the other, lead guard on this team, Courtney Vandersloot. So she is the starting point guard,
Mhm.
but she's also a bit of a non-shooter. There are times where like maybe they go under the screen and then Courtney decides to shoot, but it's
Yeah.
pretty rare. Um, she is known as a gamer, right? She's a really good, table setting point guard. But I wonder on this team that has so many other advantage creators and again, play finishers, and she's probably the one in the starting lineup that isn't really a play finisher just because of how hesitant she is to shoot and even on her drives, like rarely looking to score. But she obviously does add other value to the team. You talked about it even in our discussion about Sabrina, just by virtue of what she allows the others to do off the ball. But right now, we've seen a great reduction in her
Mhm.
on ball role. So I want to know what value Vandersloot adds to this team when the ball is out of her hands and how you see that role evolving come playoff time.
When the ball is out of her hands, you can tell after the Olympic break, she's come back with a greater kind of understanding of how to impact the offense, even if it's a willingness to shoot, but getting some buckets off cuts, kind of spacing and where to be. And there are moments where that high level playmaking and floor reading ability manifests itself in like an impressive extra pass or swing or whatever. But that is still the challenge. She's not adding as much value as her replacement off the benches in the closing lineup in Leonie Fibish, who is a 6'4" sniper who's currently made something like 22 of her last 33 looks from three. That you just it's nothing against Sloot, who still does what she does well, but that's not a something that she can compete with in terms of off-ball offensive ability. Now, you know, on ball, which I'm sure, you remember you can ask about next, she does create these looks for Sabrina, for Stewie, to maybe start a game to ease them in a rhythm. But off the ball is where it definitely gets tricky. And it's not that she's doing anything harmful, it's just that the Liberty have other options.
So you actually had this tweet, I believe it was yesterday, and I think you were talking about Courtney Vandersloot, but correct me if I'm wrong. He said, "Tough for the Liberty that their best screen navigator is short enough for all the movement shooters she guards to shoot over her."
Yeah.
So this was an issue in yesterday's game with, in particular, Courtney Williams of the Minnesota Lynx, who we'll talk about in a bit. But that is another problem when you talk about the off ball value that applies even when you're defensively because
Yeah.
the like you said, the movement shooter, she's not necessarily having to guard on the ball a ton, but the movement shooters are able to either lose her or she gets there in time. But a lot of these, the best ones anyway, are
Mhm.
able to just rise up and fire over her.
Yeah. I
What do you
mean,
see as her primary defensive value in a playoff context in particular? Because I think that like off ball, when she's not having to guard a movement shooter, like she's really good at like staying vigilant and like playing passing lanes and all of that. Very high IQ player.
yeah, she is just small. That's really it. Like she's good and talented at playing defense. And like against the Sun, they put her on Dewana Bonner for stretches and Marina Mabry. And I think the tweet that inspired that yesterday was actually her guardian Kayla McBride.
Mm,
But it's obviously applicable to Courtney Williams. When the Liberty kind of, their switching isn't great, when they're guarding movement shooters and some things break down, they'll just be like, okay, Sloot, go chase. And it simplifies things. She also has a very hard job. And so I think that's going to be some of her value. Like for stretches, they can certainly put her on these shooters and she can get through screens and just they have a different look. But in general, it is just that. Like if you play her with four wings and you take Sabrina off the court, she's going to contribute. She's going to be feisty. She's going to be in the right places and, communicate and do all the little things that you want. So I do think that is a valuable role for her to have. And even her guarding somebody like Kelsey Plum, which we've seen in a couple Aces games, she can force KP directionally. Like she knows where the help is, she knows what they're trying to achieve. But Kelsey Plum may just hit a step back three over her, and you kind of have to live with that.
yeah, Kelsey's been doing that to a lot of people this season.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not an indictment.
Okay, let's talk about, I guess, reigning WNBA League MVP Breanna Stewart. We've gotten through about half this conversation, and we've barely mentioned her. She's currently averaging 20 points, 8 rebounds, 3.8 assists on 45, 28, 83 splits. She's an incredibly versatile offensive player as this highly skilled power forward. But I actually wanna talk more in this conversation about her defense. I think that her offensive brilliance is, rather well known, and when our viewers check out the Liberty in the playoffs, it will be more obvious.
Hmm.
But Stewie has a 7'1" wingspan, um, and I can't tell you how many times I've seen her block these, like, last-second shot attempts at the end of a quarter, and, I believe you've already alluded to this ridiculously high motor that Breanna
Yeah.
Stewart has, and she's able to keep up this consistent defensive playmaking, both in blocks, in steals, in just deflections in general. She plays free safety a lot for the New York
Hmm.
Liberty. Can you just speak on just Stewie's role in making the Liberty the number 3 defense in the WNBA this season? And it's like a pretty solidly number 3. There seems to be like a gap between like the top maybe 3 or 4 teams and
Hmm.
the rest of the league. And really, what's keeping her out of the defensive player of the year, at least the conversations this season? Because I haven't seen too much of that in the discourse.
Right. So I'm assuming this, would you say this is like the season you've watched probably the most of her?
Yeah, for sure.
And like this is pop to you just like watching games. You kind of maybe this was an undersold ability of her. Like,
Absolutely, absolutely. It's not
yeah.
really something that was talked about even, last year during her MVP campaign, but this season I'm just like, wow, she's such a good and versatile defensive player for this team. She's really important, even like, all the different adjustments that the Liberty like to make to like change the rhythm of a game, but even in the role that she plays more consistently.
Yeah, I mean, nobody could guard Courtney Williams yesterday, and who guarded her for the fourth quarter? Breanna Stewart. She just
Yeah.
is just she's like water on both ends. Whatever you need her to do, she's going to do. And I asked a group chat, what like true star in basketball history has had that kind of motor? And really the consensus answer was like Kevin Garnett.
Yeah, Kevin Garnett.
And I guess like for some of my most sicko friends, it was like John Havlicek, but I was like, I can't speak to that. But sure, go ahead. I love when teams will like late in the shot clock, like bring her player to come screen. And then it's like, oh no, you should not have brought Stewie to the level because that's when she unfurls her 7'1" arms and gets a million deflections. And I think that almost kind of speaks to the reason she's not in DPOY discussions because she does have Jonquel Jones behind her. And the
Mhm.
talk of this Liberty defense has been, oh, look at their collective length off the bench when they play Sabrina at the one. And then it's like Kennedy Burke, Leonie Fevich, Benijah, Laney Hamilton, Kayla Thornton. They have this stable of wings. And so it's viewed as a collective, rightfully so. But man, Stewie's best defensive games are destructive, like havoc creating, messing up anything the other offense wants to do. But part of that is because she's afforded that freedom with Jonquel Jones as
Mm.
a rim protector behind her. And so if I had to pinpoint a reason that she's not like a front runner for defensive player of the year, I think it would be that. But man, I mean, if you watched that Lynx game yesterday, her motor down 20 is is
I was like,
unbelievable.
wow,
It's
Brianna's really trying to win this game right now.
They have to save her from herself sometimes. Like I mean this as the utmost compliment. It's like she will die on the court, I think. When she when no matter when her like 80 years old, whatever, like it's she pushes herself to the limit. It's incredible to watch.
Yeah, and it was really on both ends, like, she's like I was watching this game with my fiancé. He was, like, playing a video game on his computer, and then when the Liberty were making their second half run, he's just like, "Wow." It's so crazy to me that that player's referring to Brianna,
Yeah.
just scored on, like, this ridiculous drive, and then immediately is, like, picking up Courtney Williams full court, just, like, ready, like, assuming the defensive stance and is like, "Let's go." And he kept pointing it out every single possession, and then eventually comes and joins me on the couch, and then we both when Stewie makes the 3 that I think finally cuts the lead to single digits because they were kind
Yeah,
of hovering for really the whole game. We were both like, "Oh my god, is she
I
really gonna
know.
do this?"
Yeah.
Of course, it was a little too late. There were other, issues with the team throughout the game, especially in the first half, but I thought that second half, and especially the first quarter was certainly a display, of what you have been talking about.
Yeah, another
So
thing is she
oh,
can
go ahead.
do anything. Oh yeah, like, I tweeted a lot last week about how what an effective off-ball player she was. All the cuts and, yeah, spotted threes, which she's hitting again, but such an efficient and timely off-ball mover. Yesterday it was like, give me the ball. I'm gonna go get a bucket. It really is whatever they need. And that's why sometimes you go an hour talking about the Liberty and you don't mention Stewie. It's an experience I've had before because you're just like, what are the others doing? Because no matter what Stewie's doing, she's going to be doing it well and fitting in and like doing whatever, And it's easy to take that for granted, but man, one of the most fun watches in basketball still, which I think can sometimes be underappreciated, just how electrifying she is to watch.
So you talked about the other wings on this
Mhm.
team, the others, right?
Yes,
Benijah, Laney Hamilton, Leonie Fevich, Kayla Thornton, and also
Kennedy
is it
Burke.
Kennedy? Yes, Kennedy Burke, exactly. And you mentioned Niara Sabali, who's coming off the bench as a big, but I want to talk
Right.
about these kind of the 3 and D wings
Yeah.
effectively on this team. I really wanna shout out Benijah because she is one of the funnest players to watch, like, for people that are like, "Oh my god, I love watching players on defense," like but I wanted you to talk a little bit more about the wings that are coming off of the bench,
Right.
particularly Leonie Fiebish, Kayla Thornton, who's been on the team, but also Kennedy Burke, and the versatility that they provide the Liberty defensively. I wanted to know because last season a big talking point about the team, both going into the playoffs and obviously coming out of a loss in the finals, was the lack of depth that they had coming off of their bench. And what do people mean when they say, depth? Is it like for the regular season? Is it for the playoffs? Like,
Mhm.
what are their strengths, but also what are the weaknesses that could, limit their time on the floor when it comes to the playoffs, such as was the case for a player like Marine Johannes last year, who was coming off of the bench for them.
It's funny, last season, the Liberty played their starting lineup 520 minutes in the regular season, and not one other lineup cracked 100 minutes, which is really all you
Mm.
need to know.
That sounds familiar.
I knew you'd appreciate that. Well, hopefully, this is gonna be relevant again for you this year. They now are probably gonna have 5 lineups over 100 minutes this
Mhm.
season because they have all these mix and match wings. It's like Kennedy Burke provides a little more downhill driving, a closeout attacks, a little longer and, like, more of a secondary rim protector than Kayla Thornton. But Kayla Thornton might shoot 40% from 3 for a month. So it kind of illustrates how Sandy Brondello can mix and match and put these wings in spots to succeed. And Leonie Fiebish is this not going to get the same love as other members of the rookie class. And I understand why. Like, she wasn't drafted this year, whatever, not big box score numbers at all. But she is the rare rookie that just doesn't make negative plays. Every single small value added corner three, box out on a big extra pass, she's making it. And that's made her the most impressive of the group and a lock for 25, 30 minutes a night in the playoffs. So I think you're going to see them throw different looks out where they are long, they are switchy, they have all of this secondary rim protection on the court, getting deflections and whatnot. But the second part of your point, what may limit them, why I actually liked Benijah Laney Hamilton coming off the bench when she returned from injury, none of them are going to create offense.
Mm.
So that is going to be the challenge that Sandy has to work with in the playoffs, where it's like, okay, you can't sub everybody out at the same time. You have to keep certain players on the court to handle the ball, and that's where their offense can definitely hit a snag because they are very dependent on the stars. And when the ball's not swinging, Leonie Fiebish and Kayla Thornton end up with like 5 combined shots in 45 minutes. And that's a telltale sign of like something's not right. We're not getting those swing corner threes. And again, I'm sure this is pretty analogous for you to some of the role players on Denver, maybe not bringing that offensive punch off the bench.
Oh yeah, no, it sounds like it sounds very, very, very familiar. Yeah, I hope that the pieces that we add some versatility. But like you said, you like when someone like Benijah comes off of the bench because then you have someone who can at least create
Mhm.
offense, at least for themselves, and sometimes can create advantages for others. It
Yeah.
is a rough time watching an all bench lineup not understand how to like run a set or run any kind of thing.
Yeah, there was one lineup, I think in their last loss to the Sun where it was like Sloot and then Stewie, Kennedy Burke, Kayla Thornton, um, and maybe Niara Sabali, where it was like, I mean, what like, okay, what are they gonna run besides Stewie, please save us?
We've talked about the strengths and weaknesses really of each of these players. Not too many of the weaknesses with Stewie, just because even when she's not impacting the game in one way, she's finding other
Yeah.
other ways to be effective on the floor. Last year they obviously took that loss in the finals. The Aces were ridiculous, even when they had players out, and both teams like it devolved into like disgusting rock fights, and the Aces were able to pull it out. But it seems like, with the exception of people that are just kind of paying that, just respect to the Aces of like, they still deserve to they have to prove that it's not them for us
Right.
to, take them off of that title as favorites, or off of remove the title of favorites for the title. But if the Liberty don't win and it's not because of the Aces, what would be the reason?
Like, what self-inflicted damage do
Yes.
they do? Alright, yeah. The Aces, I guess to bring it back to them, kinda showed something interesting in their narrow defeat in New York without Asia Wilson. It was, we're abandoning the offensive glass. We're getting back on defense. None of this open floor stuff where the Liberty's talent is shocking and overwhelming at times. No doubling Sabrina. We're not granting you any of these advantages that you're accustomed to. And we're going to see if you can create that beautiful ball movement and, player movement in the half court in a grinded out, out the mud game. They didn't, the Liberty weren't able to accomplish that in the finals last season when they scored 69 points in a game 4 loss. And that is kind of the one question I have for them is how, especially if Sabrina's not going to be doubled, how are they going to create these corner threes for their role players? How are they going to create these easy looks for Stewie and JJ and Sabrina that get them going in a half court setting? And it almost feels weird or maybe unexpected for me to be more concerned about the half court offense than the defense for them when a lot of what we heard after the Aces series last year was how can Sloot and Sabrina guard in the backcourt and they're small and whatever. They lost that game 70-69.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there were moments you can point to, and there are, but is this half court offense going to be able to keep applying good habits if they get down in games in a tight spot? That's, I guess, the main area of concern for me, especially with Sabrina on a super, super cold stretch that's now 2-3 weeks old. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And maybe you could say that with the bench pieces that they've added, the need to play the beautiful game, if you will, is
Yes.
perhaps lessened because they could weather those rock fights a little bit better. But I remember,
Mhm.
watching that game and seeing your tweet afterward about it effectively being a moral loss.
Yeah.
They did grind it out at the end, but that was a game where the Aces, like you say, without Asia Wilson, were able to claw their way back from a 20 plus point deficit in the middle of the game to did they took the lead at some point in the
They took a
fourth
1 point
quarter.
lead. Yeah.
Just like, oh my gosh, what are the
Yeah.
Liberty doing
There's
right now?
also Benaja's leg fully bent, like,
Oh yeah, there was
I thought
the
she was done, and
yeah,
I don't know what her knees made out of, but we need to invest in that.
in that material.
Some sector of government needs to invest. I don't know what it would be, but that was pretty crazy. So,
For everyone listening, over half of you are not subscribed. So if you do like our content, please remember to subscribe. And then always remember that winning is fun and losing sucks.